Okay, welcome to the W3C Membership Technical Working Group call for Thursday, 11th November, 2021. I'm Timothy Hill, not OpenActive Services as I appear right now, chairing the meeting for the Open Data Institute, and I'll just go around and ask others to introduce themselves in the order that they appear on my screen. Rob, can you introduce yourself?
I'm Rob Redpath, part of Open Data Services Co-op. We're doing some work to support OpenActive's governance.
Thank you. Debbie.
Debbie Giordano, Everyone Active.
Thank you. Andrew.
Andrew Marshall, Principal Architect at Gladstone.
Matthew.
Matthew Davies, Sports.com.
Andy Gordon.
Andy Gordon from Gladstone, Senior Product Owner.
And finally, Nick Evans.
Nick Evans from Ironman, who's eating my lunch. So I'm going to put this back on.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you all. Start sharing here. Okay, so first of all, I'd like to thank everybody who contributed to the terminology discussion that got kicked off at the previous call. There's been some activity on Slack. Some of you may not have seen it. I think we've closed off a number of issues. I think there's a couple that are still outstanding that we can review today. And then either resolve them or we can keep talking about it on Slack. That was just a refresher for what we're actually talking about, the membership proposal there. I'll open that up for later reference. So definitions that I think we've agreed upon, just to review, customer accounts are entities that exist on both the broker and the booking system. But to keep from confusion arising about what exactly we're talking about with customer accounts, as we've frequently had some difficulties there, the proposal will refer explicitly only to customer accounts in the booking system, and will be, with reference to broker, they'll be declared out of scope. We also had a bit of a discussion about barcodes, and it was agreed that we would use access pass as the generic term covering barcodes, QR codes, and swipe cards. There are other possibilities, such as biometric entry and certain kinds of contact transfers. However, the scope of the proposal will be barcodes, QR codes, and swipe cards, and that will be explicitly noted in the document itself. So those are what we've agreed so far. The open issue it goes back to entitlements and claims, which we discussed on the last call. Well, we started getting into the last call, and then there's been further conversation on GitHub. I think this ended up being more of an issue about actually how things are modeled than it is about how things are named. So what I might loosely call the entitlements proposal that's in the document assumes a modeling whereby there are certain categories of membership, and each offer has got, well, each set of offers, each offer within a set of offers will be associated with some kind of category. The broker is aware of what category the user belongs to and aligns the price based on that code that's in the offer. So there's a sort of pre-agreement between the broker and the booking system about what those categories are and how they're encoded, how they're represented. The claims model allows more flexibility in the sense that it makes a series of assertions about the customer account, and which can be interpreted in a variety of ways by the booking system. There can be more logic on the booking system and more automation, I suppose, of how those are handled with less need for pre-agreement. So ultimately, I think my conclusion was this boiled down to a question about use case, that if we've got use cases where the additional complexity that claims add is needed and where that flexibility is required, then we should take another look at the modeling. If we don't have use cases for that. If in fact it's the case that most of the time this kind of pre-agreement is going to be the context in which we operate, then we probably can leave that complexity to the side. I couldn't think of any use cases for the greater complexity. So I'll just quickly canvass if anybody on the call has got some. If not, I'll refer everyone to the GitHub conversation for further reflection. So is there anything arising off the top of people's heads about claim modeling and cases where that might be necessary? Okay, I can see Matthew shaking his head. Okay, I will.
I was going to say, sorry, I was going to say, Matt, thank you. It was a really great chat. I didn't have a chance to finish the thread on that, but I really appreciate the thoughts. Were really interesting from my perspective, looking at different ways of thinking about that. So that was all. I thought I didn't want to make it look like I just gone off the camera and then started really that.
Yeah, sure. No, I was saying to Tim on the call before you arrived, I think he summarized it pretty concisely there. And as I say, you've got much better knowledge of all the use cases and the code and everything. So yeah, it's all good.
Yeah, I think it might be useful to open the conversation out a little bit outside of, because I think all of us are, for lack of anything else concrete to think about, MCR active and active Westminster is what drives this. So it might be useful to reflect a little more widely. But I think I'm going to have to throw that on other people on the call, simply because I don't have the kind of sector expertise that would let me think coherently about what other possibilities are realistic to contemplate there.
Yeah, I think I struggled to come up with a case where you couldn't model the claim as an entitlement, and Nick's point of you don't want to have all the booking systems have to replicate the logic of what entitle is a very valid one. So as you said, claims would make it much more flexible, and I still think that these are claims. However, modeling them as entitlements probably does make sense for all of the use cases which are currently under discussion. So there you
go. Okay, maybe I'll send around an email after the call, just asking really who else we should maybe explicitly consult, who we should flag this with, and then if we come up with a list of length 0, then the case is closed. And if we do come up with additional people to consult, we can do that offline or on Slack or on email.
Yeah, and it might also be worth thinking about mixed mode. Like if we implement claims now, can we implement entitlements now? Is there a way that we can have one eye on how it might be expanded in the future to handle the claims use case? And so it doesn't preclude that being a thing that we could build out if needed, but doesn't require all the booking systems to do that additional work at this stage. Kind of in like an MVP sense, can we keep the scope of the implementation narrow, and also make sure that we're not blocking ourselves off from expanding things in the future? And that's a good point. Yeah, and I can already see how workarounds might exist if you did have a sort of claims world, how you would get that into the entitlements model. So yeah, I also, perhaps against my better judgment, raised in the Slack channel another term we could use for entitlements versus claims. Nick and I had arrived at applicable offers, I think. I've now reconsidered that. However, I don't necessarily want to reopen that here. So we can continue that on Slack, and I'll send a reminder around for that Slack channel after the call. Which leaves us really with getting into the meat of the document. I think some of this might seem a little over thorough, perhaps a little officious, but I think it's probably worth going through the entirety of the document just to make sure that everybody's got a good grasp of it and is going through it in fairly fine detail. So I've just picked out the first 2 sections and the associated appendices for discussion. And I propose we just get going on that and see how far we get. I believe Andrew and Matt both need to be off at 2. So we might be able to motor on past that point, or we can, depending on how far we get, we could declare it closed there. And we've already discussed these at
these first two at various points. So I think most of the issues here have been resolved, but it's worth getting into the detail at this point. So checking whether a customer account exists. So this is obviously the very first step is in aligning customer accounts on the broker with the customer accounts in the booking system, is just checking whether there's one that exists. We've already talked about the possible security implications of this and arrived at the need to just simply flag that there are guidelines already about this and how to mitigate those kinds of risks. And in fact, the amount of information returned in the response is limited just to the number of accounts that are associated with the given email address. So the API specification there is fairly simple. Don't think there's any surprises there. Does this ring any alarm bells for anybody? This seems fairly trivial, hopefully, once the security question is dealt with. I also had a note that I made for myself that we should review the preamble to Appendix D. I don't now know why I noted that for myself, and I'm wondering if the text possibly changed. I suppose the only point worth raising would be all booking system endpoints being secured by OpenID Connect and OAuth 2.0, but I think that's pretty fair bedrock to build upon there. So if there's nothing of interest to discuss there, creating a new customer account. So this is a meatier topic. And I think this is also where a lot of the flow problems start arising, or questions about flow. So OpenID Connect is used to create a new customer account, meaning on the booking system, after the user has already signed up to the broker and verified their password. So we've got a flow here. The booking system presents you with this information screen, I suppose. And this is all handled by the booking system side. This has nothing to do with the broker here. The email address is a login hint for OpenID Connect, so the user doesn't have to re-enter it. A new account is created. The broker has offline access. And so claim here, Nick, is being used in what sense?
So this is a OpenID Connect claim.
Okay.
As in OpenID, a claim is something that's specifically passed back from the authenticating party. So this it's basically just a property that you get.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So we just wanted to make sure that was clear.
Yes, this was written before we talked about claims being used in a broader sense. So
yeah. Maybe worth adding a link in there or something like that to indicate. And then customer details may then be updated using updating customer account details in the seller. And sorry, seller here means on the booking system, I assume. Yeah.
So everyone active or GLL or whoever.
So already this line about already having an everyone active account, that would link to authentication of the account, which is dealt with in section 3. I started losing the plot a bit here with the specification discourages free text fields on the create page other than the email field to ensure a smooth user journey in all cases. So the idea is that because the brokers capture this information, that gets transmitted in the separate call.
Yeah, this was added, I think, off the back of one of these calls, this particular statement, as a response from previous feedback. I can't remember who it was attribute that line. Maybe it was Mark, I'm not sure. The idea that if we didn't have this in there, then you could end up with the sign up page, the screenshot above being a whole, sign up, register, everything.
Mhm.
And that wasn't in keeping with the intention behind the process here. So it's not, it shouldn't be that when you've signed up to, for example, MCR Active or another broker, and then you go to sign up to Everyone Active through that broker, you don't then get presented with a whole set of fields to fill in again with your full
Right,
name,
right.
email address, phone number, date of birth, address, 5 fields of address, emergency contact, right? Because you've already put all that information in once. And so the intention here is to use all that information from the broker, so that you can just seamlessly sign up with a box that kind of as displayed above.
Sorry if we've already discussed this. I don't think we did though. So what happens in the case where the required fields for the broker and the required fields for the booking system don't align?
It's a good point. This is actually mentioned in Appendix something.
Sure.
Appendix something, which is what? D3.
Okay. Mhm.
In D3, there's a paragraph I've just highlighted. And so I mean, I can talk through the paragraph. If you click on my face there, it might jump to it, or it might not. Okay.
Yeah, your cursor
it's
for me
above.
is there. Yeah.
Previous page. I don't know why it's.
Oh,
there
okay. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So what this is saying is that it doesn't support required fields. And the reason it given here, and it's the same as with the open booking spec itself, is that required fields seem to create a kind of strange behavior in an API sense, in that either if they're required from a business perspective, then those things can be agreed out of band between the various parties. So, there's no way that this, for example, with the MCR use case, there's no way that MCR can go live without an agreement between MCR and Everyone Active about the fields they're capturing and the data required. So that exists, right? There's always going to be a discussion about required fields that happens agreed between parties. The problem with having required fields in an API level is that when the API requirement, the API required fields don't match the business decision, and sometimes they don't. Sometimes the business changes their mind. Sometimes one business wants 2 fields, the other business wants 5 fields, someone else wants 10 fields, whatever. It's fine if the number of required fields the business wants is more than the system has, but if it's less than the system has, then you end up in some really strange places where you kind of end up hacking the system by putting in dummy data or random text and things like this. And so this is kind of recognizing that issue, and something that we've come across in a few different places, where that kind of by the system being the one that requires it rather than the actual end customer, if you like, well, the Everyone Active or whoever requiring it, that it kind of sets us up for a bit of a strange setup. So this is what this says, is that therefore there is no required set of fields here for the account to be created, except for email address. Obviously, that is the unique ID, if you like, which isn't unique in all systems. We were aware of that, obviously, but certainly that is at least provided. But except for email address, there's nothing else that's necessary to create the account. And so with email address alone, and maybe nothing else valid passed, you would just get a very empty account. And obviously, some systems already have those required fields. I can talk to the case of Legend. What happens there is a kind of a dummy value entered in the fields in the case where they're not required, to allow the system to work and accordingly. Now, obviously, that dummy value won't actually get passed in the case that the data is provided, which, for example, with MCR, those minimum fields would be provided because there's validation, etc. But what that means is we don't have a situation where the API and the test suite and all the rest of it needs to deal with really complicated validation logic and required fields logic and error cases. And you get things like, the member not being created because one of the fields wasn't provided, and then have to deal with all the edge cases around that. So that's the idea behind that logic.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I suppose it's a bit. Would it be helpful, I suppose, to provide guidance around out of band discussions? Because I feel like there's a lot that's out of band. I mean, obviously, payment is out of band, but I think reference to a payment provider covers that fairly easily. But things like the entitlement codes, things like what fields are required and the kind of logic that you pursue if they're not supplied and those kinds of things. I feel like these are actually fairly operationally significant kinds of things that need to be discussed in some kind of detail. And I wonder if we need to provide more guidance, not technical guidance as such, but just a sort of procedural guide for, here are 10 things you need to remember when you're talking about these.
Yeah, things to agree as part of the configuration. Yeah, that sounds like a good idea.
Because I assume MCR active. Oh, sorry, Matt.
Well, sorry, I was just going to say, if it hasn't come up already, I think one of the things that will almost immediately be something that people are wanting to know over and above the information the broker can supply across is permission to markets and things like that. Basically, all the GDPR gumph. Because if we're creating an account within the booking system, then the seller is going to want to know whether they are, is going to want to ask the customer at that point, can we please tell you about all our products and services? And if they don't have the opportunity to do that there, then that account is somewhat in it's in an odd state immediately. They haven't, and they're going to have to reset their password in order to use it, etc. So I suppose at that point there is an opportunity, but I definitely think that is going to be, if it hasn't already been, a question that would be raised to say, can we please gather this information as well as you passing it across that?
Yeah, so that is, I'm trying to find where that's covered, but that is that the idea there would be that is a tick box on the, if you click on my face, there we go. There, yes, this, the tick box under where it says, I have read and agree the health questionnaire. Another tick box under there could easily be, and I agree to the marketing preferences, blah. And there's actually a further one, which I think GLL are adding from memory. I can't remember what it is though. But yeah, so the idea that those tick boxes are there as part of that sign up process. So you're providing email, then a few tick boxes, which may be filled in by default or not.
So Boolean additional questions are okay, just not free text ones, because if we're allowing them to capture extra information like this, why not capture the other extra information which is mandatory within the booking system within which you're creating the account?
Yes, exactly, that's why it says discourages free text fields. So I think the idea here is that context specific information where absolutely necessary is captured at that point. So context by context specific, I mean specific to that particular seller. So we're talking about the health questionnaire for everyone active, the terms and conditions for everyone active, the marketing permissions for everyone active, whereas the other information that's passed as free text is full name, surname, email address, all the things that are kind of attributes of the person rather than things that have a specific context of the seller.
Cool. Yeah, I can't off the top of my head think of a free text example of something that was specific to MCR active, but I suspect something might exist as such, but maybe not. So let's just I'll agree there. Yeah.
So really, it's another use case question. It's a kind of, what are the conceivable things? That's a kind of thing where I think I suppose a survey would be helpful there about what do systems tend to do, and I guess we've already looked at Legend and Gladstone, so I think we've probably got a fairly, although how much does that differ for Legend and Gladstone? Actually, come to think of it, it must be a configuration thing that those systems have got a variety of questions they might ask, and that gets tailored.
I was going to say, I don't know if we need to standardize this aspect, because what we're really saying, well, I think anyway, is there's a number of fields that are captured at the broker level that are then passed through to the booking system, and then anything else that is booking system specific can be captured at the screen. But we're not standardizing the screen itself, if that makes sense. So like if we've missed one, I can just stick it in.
Yeah, I guess if the language is that free text fields are discouraged rather than forbidden, I suppose. I guess that's
exactly that. That's right. So that and that's the idea, because we won't. I mean, even although so I wasn't saying let's not do a survey. This is definitely that, but more that if the survey was only for this purpose, that maybe we wouldn't be able to get a complete list anyway, even with a survey of however many people.
Isn't it more that you're discouraging the capture of data that has already been captured, as in that's the discouragement more than it being free text fields are discouraged? It's more, isn't it more that you don't want to have to, tell people type your name in again here, although we have already pre-filled it for you? Or is that not? Am I misunderstanding that?
No, you're actually, that's a really good point. This should be clarified, shouldn't it? I think there's two things in there. There's free text fields so that this doesn't become a really arduous journey, a user journey. At least free text fields, the booking system is only adding the free text fields if the sellers asked for them. Do you see what I mean? It's not that the systems are introducing a bunch of stuff that the user has to then go through that the seller has to put up with, which I think maybe historically has been the case in some systems where there's long processes that people have to go through just because they're there, not because anyone wants to go through them or they want them to exist. So rather than accidentally creating another one of those here, it's almost, I think I can't remember who this point was from, but I think the idea was to start with the opposite. Can we keep this as simple as possible, unless we absolutely need to add something for the user journey, in which case let's add it, but we recognize that the specification is discouraging that complexity in the user journey.
Right, gotcha.
Which is definitely not what this sentence says, so we should make the sentence say that. Yeah.
Okay. So I think there's some useful clarifications that we can add there, but the basic principle I think is fairly clear, or at least it's been enunciated clearly, so it can be enunciated clearly there. Okay. I suppose the next bit.
Sorry, I was going to say, does that make sense to the others on the Debbie, Andrew, and Andy in terms of what we were just talking about there?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I would repeat that question to Andrew and Andy specifically, and possibly Debbie, with these two paragraphs here. Their motivation and rationale, I think, is pretty clear. I'm just not sure how this plays out technically for actual implementing systems. So we get an uninitialized account created, and then it gets deleted again if there's 5 minutes of, well, not even dormancy, but 5 minutes where the completion doesn't occur. And then there's an OpenID claim that gets used to indicate that. Yeah, sorry, I just realized that 5 minutes probably shouldn't be, it's not in the spec as a hard 5 minutes, because we don't tend to put hard times in for anything like that. So that's not a so I can explain the reason for this, and this has actually come out again from Mark in, I think it might have been even in the same conversation from Gladstone. We had a whole conversation about if we create an account that only has an email address and none of the other fields have been populated, Andy might remember this conversation, then we're going to have a kind of weird dummy account that exists that's going to be in the database, and that's not going to be that useful. We talked about different ways of solving that problem. And so this mechanism, which was introduced off the back of that conversation as a way of making that kind of really explicit, is this idea of when you create, there's two-step process. Because of the way the API works, you create the account to start with only an email address, and then you fill that account out with all the required fields, required in the sense of the seller requires them, everyone active requires them, for example.
So there's a gap in between which, if I don't know, lightning strikes the server or something, in a very unlikely case, you might end up with the account uninitialized but never actually filled out with all of the detail. And so what the proposal here suggests is that the uninitialized account can't be used for anything. So there's no route where someone could accidentally code into their system, create an uninitialized account, and then crack on and do everything else. That uninitialized account exists entirely for the purpose of being initialized, at which point it can be used for everything else. That kind of gets rid of this being a kind of technical error, because you can't code the system any other way. And then what you're left with is this issue of it might be like some really unlikely error case, in which case, what we talked about in that conversation was that there might be some kind of cleanup process there, to make sure that we don't end up with those accounts sitting around if they don't.
Right. Yeah.
But that's like, we're talking about the 0.1% lightning has struck the server type thing. So it's unlikely that there'll be a problem, but that cleanup process would exist to ensure that's not an issue.
I'm really sorry if I'm being stupid, but you've already got these details in the broker's system. Am I wrong?
Yep.
So why can't they just be submitted at the same point that the email address is submitted to the booking system?
Fantastic question. And the answer to that actually lies in the GitHub, some of the GitHub conversation we've already had. So there's lots of parts to this. One of the answers is that it's around this whole federated versus not federated question, which we kind of covered previously, but I can go into that. But without federation, without another level of complexity, which adds cost and other issues, which we can talk about, the OpenID Connect mechanism doesn't provide any way of supplying that detail at the point of creation. So basically, the standard that we're basing this standard off of doesn't let us do that. Is the kind of simple way of saying it.
Okay, the concern for me would be that email address is not enough to validate whether that account already exists or not. So we're going to end up with duplicates rather than using an existing account. So if somebody ends up on the broker system and they don't realize they have an everyone active account or don't know the details of an everyone active account, it happens with our own website, so it's going to happen with yours, that, well, not yours personally, but this scenario, that they're going to end up on the broker system and they're going to say, yeah, I'm happy for you to create an account with everyone active, not knowing that they've already got an account. At the point that a record's created, those checks should be in place to find out if it already exists, and if it does, encourage the person to log in rather than creating a new record. But just an email isn't going to be enough to validate an existing account or not.
Well, yeah, so there's two things. There's, which probably Tim's scrolling up to, there's a check for whether the email address already exists on the system that the broker is able to use earlier in the journey. So before the broker is even given the opportunity to create an account, the email address is checked, and if there's a matching email, they're prompted to log into the existing account rather than create a new one.
Right, okay, yeah.
So by the time they get to creation, we're talking about someone that's already
verified, doesn't exist.
Exactly.
Okay.
Or explicitly decided they don't want to use the existing account, like login. Might just cancel next.
I guess to go along with what Debbie's saying though, email is not unique in our system, so you could end up with 10 duplicates of that already.
That's right. So if you go back up to sorry, number one there, Tim, the check whether the account exists, or in fact, oh, sorry, if you've got the appendix associated with that, that's where the actual thing is, isn't it?
Let's see here.
Nice.
No, hold on. I need.
That's it. Yeah, I think that's
that one. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
It'll bounce in a second, I think. There we go. Yeah. Okay.
Yes. So if you go slightly down the right, so that that is, Andrew, that's covered by the number of items returned. So that 2 in that example is the number of matching records for that email address. So in the example there, it could be 10. It could be 10 emails that match. And then it's up to the user to log in, depending on how you differentiate. It sounds like in Gladstone, it's the password that's different. It's up to the user to log into the appropriate account. If that's helpful. Does that answer that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so then, yeah, that puts the onus on the booking system, I guess, to decide how it wants to handle that case. But yeah. And I assume, yeah, and then section 3 deals with cases where the information in the broker is not an exact match for the information in the booking system, that there's some kind of process of reconciliation that you can do to align that data.
You were talking about logging in there, Tim.
Well, yeah, if you're connecting to a previously existing account, there's this possibility of information inconsistency. But then in section 3, we get into how we deal with that. Okay, so if creating this uninitialized account and then deleting it doesn't raise any sort of technical hackles for people. So we've got the OpenID claim about is pending initialization having to be used. So I guess if we're supporting OpenID at all, then I assume this comes as sort of part of the package, that this is not an extension to OpenID or anything that needs further configuration.
Well, so this is a custom claim in OpenID land. So this would be a custom claim that is passed back in Identity Server 4, which is the .NET library. That's very straightforward. You just add a claim to the response and it comes back with the record. So
okay.
It's just that claim needs a name and a wrapper value, kind of key pair.
Yeah, I'm asking really sort of, I guess, on behalf of Andrew and Andy about whether this is something that Gladstone readily supports, really, I guess.
So
it's not something as such we support as such at the moment. We're working with third parties to provide this piece, so that's part of that discussion.
Right. Okay. Cool. Again, yeah, if that claim is there, updating customer accounts in the seller is then used to actually ferry the information into the account that is being initialized. Okay. Is everybody therefore happy with the main text of section 2 there? Okay. So jumping to the appendices. So this, I suppose, relates most immediately to the sorry, now I'm in too many tabs land. This bit here, I have read and agreed to the health questionnaire. Activity-specific prerequisite videos and waivers. Oh, actually, now rereading that, I'm now confused. Actually, I thought this pertained to that particular box that's saying I've looked at this waiver, I agree to the terms and conditions. But this seems to be something more specific.
So this is covering the need for waivers within an open booking context. Actually, this isn't strictly part of the membership.
Right. Okay.
It's almost saying that from the requirements that were mentioned around waivers and videos, that this is how you would deal with it from a guest perspective.
Right. Okay.
So for guests that need to see an induction, the thing is, this is only a suggestion, and I think also within it might be the case, for example, within Gladstone and Everyone Active, that you just force them to register, and rather than providing them an option as a guest to book in at the gym, you just force them to register through the create or login process.
Yeah, we wouldn't allow guests to book into the gym. We need
Right.
them to have a registered account and have a subscription allocated to them. Just ticking a box isn't good enough.
Yeah, so I think in this case, exactly. So for that reason, this is a kind of suggestion for systems that don't want to take that route, rather than a kind of this must be how you do that.
Can we make that clear that this is a suggestion and that it's not, because it reads that it's a it's something that would be put in there or it would be used, and that's not necessarily the case, is it?
Yes, it can be used versus must be used. It's very yeah, it's not formal spec language, isn't it? May is the language in a spec that probably would be appropriate rather than must or could or should. Sorry.
Yeah, I think there's probably a little bit of business language maybe that would be useful as well. It's kind of indicating the situations in which it would be desirable to use this, and in which it wouldn't be applicable, as Debbie sort of described. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just a little bit more guidance there would probably be helpful. Right. Okay. Right. So just from my own understanding, so in fact, this tick box, where was it? The reading and agreeing to the health questionnaire. So this is really just additional information that's gathered by the booking system. That's sort of out of spec in a way, and they have their own. Yeah.
Yeah, except that the health questionnaire is also for guests included in A2. It should be clear this is for guests as well. I'll make the same change here to make it clear this is a suggestion. I mean, it might be that people decide not to ask for health questionnaire for guests. That's just not a thing that anyone's concerned about. If it was a concern, then this is a mechanism that means that the guests at the point of checkout, when they've entered their card details, bottom would say, you need to confirm these terms and conditions and privacy policy and the health questionnaire. So they would see the tick box there, and then they would then click purchase. Mm-hmm. So it's just a way of saying that alongside privacy policy and T's and C's, it's possible to add the health questionnaire there if that was something that people needed.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if we're being a bit specific again, because health questionnaire, you kind of, people will immediately start thinking of the health commitment statement, but obviously that's specifically a UK Active charged form, which not everybody utilises that. People will use other. So it's almost like booking terms.
You're totally right. I'm so sorry. It is a health commitment statement, isn't it? I don't know why it says questionnaire. Yeah, because that's what's in. That's the. I think you can see that link there. It's actually to Everyone Active's health commitment statement.
Yeah, that's the web page, but the name that we give it is questionnaire.
Oh, right. Well, right. And Andrew, your point is that this is very Everyone Active specific. So we need to make it. We should use a term here that's. What's a more general term from your understanding that we could use that? We'll cover that.
Yeah, that's what I'm struggling with. I'm just, if we're trying to make this kind of global, then I just worry that being specific on that would.
Well, if it's helpful, the spec isn't saying that it must be called a health questionnaire. This is just saying that if you wanted to describe something like a health questionnaire, the name there, you can see that's just free text. You could write anything you want in that box. The only official terminology, if you like, the only standardized terminology is this one here, which is terms. Mm-hmm. And so it's almost like these are just another type of terms alongside privacy policy and terms and conditions.
Yep.
So just so I understand, these terms are in the feeds. So Gladstone need to give us a way of saying what are the terms for Everyone Active to push through to those feeds.
Yes, I think are they in the feeds? I think they are in the feeds, aren't they?
There are checkbox within there to say passing the terms and conditions URL. Yes.
Right, there we are. Yes.
So where are we configuring that those names and those URLs, Andy?
The URLs, I believe, are within the actual data manager themselves.
Yeah.
I don't
can't-
remember seeing one for privacy policy, terms, conditions, and health questionnaire.
I think I'm just looking at that gap analysis doc, Debbie. It's got privacy policy and terms and conditions in there. It hasn't got health questionnaire, but I imagine it depends on I guess how that was constructed. But if it was just an array you could add more to and describe them however you want, I suppose to Andrew's point, maybe it shouldn't be asking for a health questionnaire URL, but just saying, here's the name of a thing, here's a URL of a thing, and then everyone active could add a health questionnaire, and someone else could add something else.
Okay.
I mean, terms and conditions I can see as being passed through the data feed, not necessarily the health questionnaire and that sort of things on a data feed. That's more checking it at the point of actually partaking in the activity.
Where
So-
are you? I need to cover it with you, Andy, but I'm not where. I
Yeah.
need to know where those boxes are in Data Manager. But
They might not be
So-
there at the moment because this might be part of the compliance with regards to the CR3 that we're still
right,
extending.
okay.
That's right. Yeah.
So in terms of some of these terms, and some of these terms will require additional updates to the member record and some won't. So how are we determining at the point a member is created what those terms need to update in the booking system?
It's a really good question, actually. Although so it might not be the question you're asking. However, but there's a thing in there that you just said, which is so there's two totally separate things happening here. There's I'm creating a new customer account. I need them to tick some boxes to create that account. And then separately to that, as a guest, I want to make sure they've ticked certain boxes so they can go and participate in the activity.
Yeah, I mean, guest was the next one I was coming on to, because we've got no way of storing this information for a guest. But I'm specifically talking about member accounts that are created in this example. We need a way of saying, right, that terms, if it's accepted or updated on the broker's system, updates this field in the database on the booking system.
So right, so in the section in section 2, where that little example window is with the thing, there you go, this thing, right? So that health questionnaire tick box under there,
yeah,
that's happening at the point of creation of the record. So in terms of making sure that record goes into MRM with the right tick, that you've kind of got that there to use that.
So therefore, at that point,
Yeah.
that's where we'd be mapping. That's where we'd be mapping to a user field. Let's say, as an example, where that we flagged against.
Yeah, but we need a method to map it. That's my point. Like, it's all right having a tick box and that's stored in the broker's system or whatever. I don't know, but
so this screen you're seeing here is a Gladstone, or the screen is in the booking system, not in the broker.
That's
So
correct. So in addition to this details being captured, we'll also capture the information that's been passed through from the broker that they've already recorded.
Mhm.
So that's what we need to do is figure out how we say that when you tick that option, I've read the health questionnaire, etc., then that is mapped to user field 22, let's say, as an example.
yeah.
That's the question.
And if those are all captured in the terms in the feed, then I think the feed and the configuration side needs to say these terms are associated to this field being updated.
Well, so that was what I was going to say with those two things. So the things the things in the feed are for everyone to tick as part of the checkout process when they make a booking through a third party. So you will get that tick box at the end of the kind of the checkout flow in MCR as part of finalizing the booking. And so that's a separate thing from and whether you're a member or not a member, or however that's come about. And that's a separate thing from the things that you get when you're created as a new member. So although it looks like the headings are the same, it says health questionnaire and terms, they're actually totally different things. They just happen to have the same name.
Okay.
So I think this points to a documentation problem within the document that again there's this kind of blur between, well, it's really about the granularity. Are we talking about the session or are we talking about the customer account? And I think probably it's annoying because I can see how putting them in one appendix makes complete sense. And I can also see how it's quite confusing that these two things are kind of shunted next to each other. Because I was confused by it, in fact. It was only when I reread it that I realized I was actually wrong in my assumption.
Because I think the challenge we've got here, and Debbie's highlighting it, is that if this was passed to another third party to do an integration, how would they know? Looking at the specification.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I've added a note to clarify that in A2 that is a different thing. We need to make the terms really clear.
I think we probably need another. Oh, sorry, Debbie, you were saying.
Just really quick, in that section, when it comes to the terms, can we explicitly state that the acceptance of these terms is not stored anywhere in the booking system if it's a guest? Because it won't be.
Mm-hmm.
So that might be. Sorry, let me just quickly check the spec to see what it actually says in it. Because terms is already in CR3, so this is actually leveraging the existing functionality. Now the question is.
So what you're saying, Debbie, is that if it's a member, we can record that. If it's a non-member, we're not actually recording it anywhere at all. All we record about the non-member is literally they're just the name details, email, and phone number.
Yeah, we've got no method to at the moment, have we?
That's right.
Yes,
Yeah. If you're creating a member record, you on that screen, that login screen further up, you're going to have a tick box for agreeing to health questionnaire and privacy policy and terms and conditions. They will update certain fields within the database at the point a member record is created.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's a guest that's making a booking, or in fact a known user that's making a booking, so actually it's anything to do with booking, isn't it? So it's any time a booking is made, there's no storage of these terms at the times a booking is made.
That's right. So basically the way this works is, I've just checked the spec. Yeah, the way this works is that these, as if you can see there, it says requires explicit consent is true. Now, so the way this works is if they haven't got required explicit consent is true, they'll just be listed under the booking in the booking screen, just there as, terms and conditions, privacy policy, but there's no tick box. It's just, by making this booking, you agree to this. And then just that list. If there's a true there, so it requires explicit consent, then what that means is it says there's a tick box, and then there's the health questionnaire. They have to then tick that thing to say they're doing that. And so there's no way you can make a booking without either ticking it if it's explicit consent, or it will say, by making this booking, you agree to blah, blah, blah.
And that's explained somewhere else, isn't it? That bit that you just went through there, that's explained in another document, isn't it?
That's okay. In the terms and conditions. That's in the terms and conditions and privacy policy section of the current booking spec. Yeah.
Right. Okay. But in here, should we explicitly state that this information is not stored in the booking system?
Yeah, there should be a reference in there, shouldn't there, really, to where you should be looking up for that particular detail.
Yeah, agreed.
My personal feeling is that we could do with more flow diagrams, which would also help indicate exactly which point in the process these two appendices or subsections are referring to. Do other people on the call think that would be helpful? Or is this just, okay, so I think that's a nod from Matt.
I would say so.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I did actually say I was on the call with Andy and Debbie prior to this on a different topic, and I did say I'd try and provide some diagrams. I haven't actually managed to, I got caught in something else before this call, but yeah, maybe as well as flow diagrams, like some screenshot-esque diagrams. cover.
Yeah, well, I think kind of like wireframes and flow diagrams are sort of helpful. It's and I think we probably getting a little off piste here, but I think we probably need some kind of color coding as well, because I think which system is responsible for what has been a persistent point of confusion. So yeah, if we've got, I don't know, blue brokers and red booking systems or something else that meets accessibility requirements, we need some kind of code. I think that makes it really blindingly clear right from the start which part of the system anybody's looking at.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm going to have to drop off the call now, but thanks very much and see you again shortly.
Thanks a lot, Matt.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, that's a really good point. Added that.
Okay, so have we dealt with those concerns?
So the only thing that I mentioned that kind of raises for me is just a question of, at the moment, there's nothing in. So at the moment, every time that someone makes a booking, they get these things, either with a tick box or not, depending on whether it says requires explicit consent. And that's any booking, whether they're a member or not a member, or guest or whatever. And then obviously we talked about that when they get created, there's a few tick boxes at the point of creation that they can tick.
Mm-hmm.
So it might be that they've already agreed to the terms and conditions and privacy policy and health questionnaire when they've created the account. And I've just kind of realized looking at this, we don't have a way at the moment of saying that you only need to give this to somebody that's a guest as a thing. So I don't know whether we want to make it possible to have terms that are guest only or something. Do you know what I mean? So that we don't ask everybody twice. But I don't know if that is something that doesn't matter.
I think it's getting too complicated, if I'm honest, because you'd have to be able to say it's not just for guests, it's for existing people, and have they got a flag against their current member record to say that they've already accepted these things in the past.
Oh, because
so
they might not have.
Well, yeah, there's a chance that they may not have, like if we inherit a contract or something like that, then there's a chance that they've not agreed to those things yet. So it feels like you may as well just present it every time somebody makes a booking to be safe, but we're not updating the booking system for that member record. Yes. Or for that guest record at the time they make a booking with regards to terms.
That makes sense. So I mean, I guess a mitigation to stop the user ticking the box all over the place is that there's the date modified mechanism in here, which is already in the spec as well, which means that if the health commitment statement hasn't been updated, that tick box is either pre-ticked or not displayed the second time they come to the second time that specific individual that is already authenticated with the broker comes to make a booking. They won't be shown the health commitment statement again if they've ticked it the first time, assuming it hasn't changed by that date modified. Might be a mitigation for them otherwise having to tick that same box every single time, unless it was just there without explicit consent, of course. In which case, it would just say, by making this booking, you agree that you agree to the terms and conditions, privacy policy, and the health questionnaire, and then they don't even need to tick the box, and then it's super easy for everyone.
Is this sufficient for liability purposes? I mean, I guess the worst case scenario, what the whole terms and conditions are designed to obviate is somebody injures themselves on a piece of equipment and the leisure center is not liable for that.
You're asking the exact same question I was trying to ask myself, but ask the group, but I was on mute. So Debbie, where do we stand with regards to liability? If they say, no, I never did such a thing, where does that liability checking lie?
I don't know. We'd have to get Dave involved.
I mean, just to be clear, though, I see. I was going to say that there was no way they can make a booking without ticking the box, but maybe that's not enough. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's a question worth investigating. Like, I mean, that makes sense. That if there's a rock solid programming application logic that if you don't tick the box, you get some kind of flow that just keeps looping you back until you do. from a software programmer's point of view, that's done. I'm just wondering that whether in a legal context that's sufficient. I mean, I would assume that it is, but it might be worth double checking that given the stakes involved. Yeah.
If it's helpful, our lawyers, so from I'm in has obviously done this for our own checkout, and our lawyers, they said that whether we ask for explicit consent or not was up to us. There's different reasons why you might or might not want to do that, and that's a decision we needed to make. But we didn't have to store it as long as it was clear that the process required it. That's just our legal counsel. I guess everyone might have different.
Okay. Would your legal counsel be willing to? Yeah. Okay. This is the difficult thing of what point do we start providing legal guidance?
No, honestly, I don't think we can. We went through this before with booking spec. I think any time that we get into anything that's close to us providing legal guidance, even GDPR implications, we could probably not do that.
Is it worth inserting a note or something to the effect of like implementers are advised to check relevant legislation for etc. Although it's a tricky one because if storage were required, there's actually no. Well, I guess it's just out of scope for the specification what you do with it. But it might be worth adding a kind of flag in there, an alert.
But I mean, if you did require it, it would just be as simple as saying that booking has come from a broker and they've had to tick the box to get there, so therefore you'd flag it. Do you see what I mean? If you had to have something that said it happened. But I don't know whether, I mean, the thing with this stuff is that in terms of the legal side of things, as long as we provide the mechanisms, then it's almost up to the individual implementers to make sure that their legal compliance side is fine.
Yeah, no, I'm really thinking more about guidance, about just saying, okay, here's a legal landmine. I guess because it's almost helpful just to indicate that it's been considered, I suppose. I guess it's reassuring in a way if you're reading the spec that even if it's saying, actually, this is your responsibility, at least it's clear that it's your responsibility and it's been thought through, I suppose, with awareness of the implications. So yeah, it might be worth adding, not guidance, but guidance that you should seek legal guidance.
Yes. Nothing that has any implication about anything that says that we have any legal authority at all.
Yeah.
But I mean, some of that's implicit because it's a terms and conditions section, you know. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I don't think it's a huge omission. But I feel like I think there's a value in making it explicit, even if it could reasonably be inferred. But
so maybe there's something about agreement and assurance of display and capture of terms and
I think there's some negotiation that needs to take place potentially between the seller and the broker as well. I'm saying that there's two parts to this. In the join piece, then you've got a record that's actually being added and we're capturing those particular details. But going through the booking flow, the broker is actually steering the booking system by what it's sending and what's being passed back from the booking system. So if the broker is then processing the payment, which it is in this particular example in this proposal, if there's a tick box there within the broker, I'm not saying where the liability lies, but the seller as such is the sort of the innocent party in that, because it's the broker that's actually steering through the booking flow and using the booking system APIs to confirm that booking.
Yes.
So that in essence, I might be right, I might be wrong here, that it's a discussion and an agreement that comes between the broker and the seller.
Yeah. I've tried to capture what you're saying there, Andy, in this sentence, but it might not be entirely clear.
Yeah, I think the main thing is there's two parts to it. There's the signing up piece of a member, because then you can capture that terms and conditions and health questionnaire, etc., and that sort of thing. I think this is maybe something in the booking spec that needs to be noted, because it's a different aspect from the booking perspective, that it's all driven from the broker, because it's the broker that's guiding the UI and the experience interfacing with the booking system. Can they or can't they make the booking? So when it comes to them saying, I agree to, whether that's explicit or optional, that's driven by the broker.
Yeah, agreed.
Right, sorry, so just I'm still catching up here. So the difficulty that this creates is we're relying on the broker to enforce acceptance of those conditions and confirm that those conditions have been accepted, which leaves the booking system or seller a bit vulnerable if they don't do that well.
Well, I'm not sure where the vulnerability lies.
Well, that's
Right, or you'd have to agree on where the vulnerability lies, I guess.
Yeah, yeah.
So what I'm trying to say in this sentence here is agreement and assurance of display and capture of the terms and conditions of terms and conditions consent by the broker on behalf of the seller is expected to be sought out of band. Basically, the spec saying that broker should capture that, and the booking system and the seller should be.
Well, again, it depends. If this is the spec with regards to the signing up process, that's not relevant here.
Sorry, you're right.
That's
so
in the booking spec.
In addition to the booking spec, yeah.
Let's keep them clear and distinct, if that's possible.
Yeah, that's a really good point. In fact, this shouldn't be a comment, and this should be an extra because this should be a addition to the booking spec, right, rather than this spec.
Yeah, I'm a little bit lost whether we're looking at the booking spec now or whether we're looking at the still in the walk-in and members proposal.
Yeah, so the confusion of this is that the members proposal includes some aspects which basically say you can use the booking spec for this. You don't need to do anything different. You don't need to build anything new. The booking spec already does it, and that's the thrust of Appendix A. These are things that the booking spec already does. You're just leveraging them in this context. But it sounds like we probably, if this becomes, so in terms of the proposal becoming a specification, I imagine that Appendix A becomes guidance rather than a spec, because Appendix A is basically just guidance to use the booking spec that exists rather than a new specification. That makes sense. I just said lots of words and lost everybody. At the top of Appendix A, it says the appendix covers related features that are already covered by the Open Booking API. So maybe we just make it clear that Appendix A is not part of the members spec, as it were.
I think that's useful. I'm just thinking it's another one of those out of band areas where actually there's a kind of translation between guidance and technical implementation that needs to be provided. That, really what you're talking about is, does require explicit consent need to be true or false, for these conditions, and potentially legally it's a bit big. So the guidance has to be fairly explicit. Yeah.
So with this being an API spec, you're talking about a set of interactions, and not all of those are going to be defined by, or can even be defined by, what the computers say to each other. But you can still include them in the scope of the specification, that when you say this field means this thing, or this call means this thing, you're saying that I, organization A, am asserting to you, organization B, that this thing is the case. Assuming that you have a contractual relationship that lets you do that. And if you don't, then don't use that call, because then you're misrepresenting yourself. There's language we've used in other specs around normative and non-normative sections to things which are helpful. And the normative sections often include both technical stuff, schema, API calls, and so on, but also just human readable descriptions of what a thing means. And we're saying that, and obviously there's a limitation to how far you can use technical tooling to validate stuff that is just humans asserting that stuff is true. But yeah, that's where contracts and agreements come in.
was I going to add to that? Is safeguarding a relevant concept here as well? Are there sometimes safeguarding terms and conditions that need to be explicitly adhered to or consented to?
Possibly, but it's around each individual type of booking. More so, like for swimming. If you're under 8, you need to be accompanied by an adult. It's those sorts of things, I think. Is that what you mean? Sorry.
Yeah, well, I was actually asking in very broad terms because it feels like minors in particular are a whole sort of different area, and all of the examples given here are really about the individual who's, I think, assumed to be an adult implicitly, and I'm just wondering whether this gets more complicated once you add minors or other dependents into the mix. Is it enough just to add, to this list, safeguarding concerns, or do they require a different kind of treatment?
Was that part of the T's and C's already, Debbie? I'm just thinking, what would stop a 16-year-old or a 16 or under 16 going on and actually signing up?
Nothing, but there's nothing to stop on our systems either.
No. So yeah, I mean, again, I know we don't have it in our systems at the minute, but would there need to be some sort of caterance for a parent to?
If they go through our join online and they enter a date of birth under 16, yeah, then it'll ask you to register an adult as well. Yeah. And then they're associated to each other.
Yeah. So is that?
But once they're on the database, they can log in and use as an adult.
Well, hey, what? Hey, is that dependent entitlements? Is that it? Have I understood that? So they have a child's account that is associated with the adult account. Can the adult account then log in and book on behalf of the child and the child?
Not yet, but they will be able to. Yeah, it's in development.
Watch this space.
Right. So this is really interesting from a broker perspective, because I don't think the inverse has been considered. As in, what if the child tries to sign up to MCR or Westminster or somewhere? Does it make sense? Because it sounds like in everyone active at the moment, if the child signs up, then the parent details are asked.
Also sign up, yeah.
Is the expectation that the child themselves is typing in that case, or is it the parent typing on behalf of the child?
It's more likely to be the parent that's typing on behalf of the child, but we can't guarantee it anyway. Either way, it could. There's nothing to stop a 14-year-old going and putting their own details in and then putting their parents' details in. There's nothing to stop that happening. I don't know. You can't, can you? You can't police what people are doing at home.
Well, I suppose the question is really with MCR and others. Actually in the specification in general here, are we, from a safeguarding perspective, are we expecting? Does it matter? Maybe it doesn't matter.
I would say that if you are creating member records for people under 16, there would be a requirement to also create a member record for the parent and associate the two.
Right. This is a really, okay, so it sounds like we might, I know we've already talked about keeping dependent accounts in scope. It sounds like it might be worth us having a session. Maybe there's no time now, but the whole topic of parent-child, how do we make sure? So I think the spec at the moment is making the assumption that there's a parent that's the person that's linking the account, and then the child gets added as a dependent to the parent. But at the moment, as it stands, if the child puts their email address in and they're 14, there's no parent captured anywhere.
Will it stop them going forward though?
Well, this is a good question. I mean, the broker could. I mean, absolutely, the broker could forbid wouldn't even let them get close to that sign-up screen, because obviously the date of birth is being captured earlier on in the process. So,
and the reason for that is because the broker action should be that it should stop that sign-up. Well, it should stop that process.
Well,
that's the expectation.
Well, this is what I'm wondering is, one, has it even been thought about, and if it hasn't, then yeah, do we need something in here around? I mean, in the spec itself, to at a minimum, it sounds like just the expectation that there is another out-of-band agreement between the broker and the booking system as to exactly who is allowed to create accounts
I think it's probably worthwhile adding something in there. Either it's out of scope or in scope, and if it's in scope, to what boundaries, or specifically what we're saying is out of scope at the moment.
Yeah.
Is this a conversation for people on this call, or is this something that we need a different set of more business focused people on?
Well, I think it's going to be part of the proposal. Well, again, it's probably not relevant at the moment with regards to the purpose of this call, which is the member and the sign up piece, but it is with regards to the early on stages of the broker's involvement with regards to what's going to be passed through to the booking system and or through to the member sign up piece. What's the expectation from the broker? Do they say stop? Or if they say go, what's the expectation beyond that point?
Yeah, there's nothing built in the models at the moment to capture the parent details. That's the thing. That's a concern I have. So if the answer was go, as Andy's saying, then the spec kind of runs out of room there, because there's obviously what Debbie is talking about is that you want the parent details captured. You don't just want to capture a minor on their own. I mean, I
it
assume
all relates to GDPR, doesn't it? Where it's consent for an under 16. That's where you have to have at least tried to get validation by a parent or guardian that that person is able to be allowed to go forward.
Correct.
That's so interesting.
And when it comes to a guest booking, you're going to allow the guest to select whether they're an adult, a junior, a senior, or whatever.
Yeah, so the guests is already, the way the guest is handled, as long as they're over 13 years old. I don't know why there's two GDPR. There's some reason why it's 13.
I think there's a default 13, but it depends to the operator whether they up it, or I don't think they potentially down it, but they could up it if necessary. It's configurable.
Right.
I think it's down to their own terms and conditions, what they can actually offer.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember I feel like there was a GDPR reason for the over 13 question, but basically at the moment, if you're over 13, you can make a guest booking as a junior if you select junior from the drop down, or as an adult. That's how that works.
I'm unfortunately going to have to drop off, but I think this subject that perhaps needs a bit more time.
Yeah. I think it's probably one. I think it's probably one maybe we pick up again on the next call. Well, either the next call or this time next week, depending on the purpose of the difference in calls.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's worth double checking what the business requirements are, and then we can pick it up technically from there. I think it's probably two-pronged.
Well, yeah, I mean, I suppose, for everyone active, it's a requirement from what I'm hearing and what I'm understanding at the moment. I don't know what the business requirement is from a GLL perspective through Legend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But in theory, I think the scope needs to cater for it. I mean, maybe if I'm right thinking, is this what the Wednesday call would be with regards to strategy and how we deal with certain things? Maybe that's a conversation for next week.
Yeah, I think that's right. Okay, well, there's that agenda sorted out. Okay, and I think I'll give people a lot of warning about that one, because I suspect there's going to be a lot of people internally that need to be consulted just to make sure all the bases are covered.
Yeah, it's good. It's really good. I'll flag to MCR for the back of this call because I know they're in the midst of going live with this. They've thought about it. Hopefully, someone has.
Yeah, I mean, they've thought a lot about safeguarding generally, actually. So their insight would be helpful. Yeah.
I know Anne-Marie can make the next Wednesday call, actually, so that'd be good.
Good.
She'll be around for that if that's the topic.
Okay. I'm tempted to call a halt to the call here, because I feel like we've reached the kind of an impasse on this particular question, and I'm not sure it's worth opening up further questions with 7 minutes left.
Just so I'm aware, from a kind of progress perspective, are we happy with 1 and 2? Then are we now on 3, as it were, on 3, with this issue obviously being a separate issue to discuss? But
I believe so. Yeah, certainly section 1. Sorry. I think modeling customer accounts, I don't think we've really examined. I think that'll be the next bit to take a look at.
C1 and C2.
Yeah.
Great.
But I think everything else, I'm reassured by the fact that it's been mostly kind of clarifications and documentation changes. I don't think there's anything to do material that's had to be changed here. It's really about clarity. Any other business from anyone that people would like to raise?
Has anybody got any brain capacity left for today?
Not for me for the moment, thanks.
Okay, time for tea break, and thank you very much for joining the call. And I'll be circulating notes, if not by the end of the week on Monday. Okay, thanks very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Back in. Cheers.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.